You've undoubtedly heard over the last week or so rumors that Josh D'Amaro, the soon-to-be CEO of the Walt Disney Company, asked that Imagineers go bigger and bolder on the villain's land coming to the Magic Kingdom. Well, according to what we're hearing, that's just not the case. So to take this from the top, the beginning of our story is, and stop me if you've heard a long-winded Tom Corliss rant before, but we're going to go way back to the start of this whole story, which is the late 1990s. In the late 1990s, there are two plans to expand the Magic Kingdom, and they're both involving mountains. One of them is Fire Mountain in Adventureland. The other one is Bald Mountain, which would have been in Fantasyland. And around it, a villains-themed area, or a villains land, if you will. It was pretty serious at the time. They had floated height balloons. There was tons of concept art. Like, it was very much a thing they were looking at doing, and then it didn't happen for a number of reasons. Both of those projects didn't happen. Both of those projects get canned. They go and they're filed away in a cabinet somewhere, which is what we like to think happens. It's like the farm upstate, but for Walt Disney Imagineering projects that don't happen. The filing cabinet down the hall. They're filed away, and it's always said that Imagineering a good idea never dies. And so 20 years later, Josh D'Amaro is the chairman of Disney Experiences. Bob Iger is back as CEO post Bob Chapek and that disaster. And at this point, he goes to Josh and he says, well, we need to grow the parks more. And if there isn't just current IP we can use, we should look to our library of our intellectual property and see what's lurking back there that people really love, that will work for the growth plans we have for these resorts around the world. And they start to dig and look through. And as looking through those ideas, they come across the Monsters, Inc. door coaster, which, of course, at one point was envisioned for Magic Kingdom's Tomorrowland. Then it was envisioned for next to Toy Story Mania at Hollywood Studios. Then it sat there for a long time, and now it's happening. And similarly, Villains Land sat there collecting dust for 2 decades, and finally, it was thought, like, maybe there's something to this. So Chris Beatty, Bruce Vaughan, other folks at Walt Disney Imagineering are asked to envision the future of Walt Disney World. And by the time we get to the 2022 D23 Expo, they're not ready to greenlight anything, but it's been identified that there are 2 problem areas. One problem area is Dino Land USA at Disney's Animal Kingdom. The other problem area is the Magic Kingdom in general. Magic Kingdom is the most visited park in the world. It's very, very busy. They need more capacity. And so it is necessary now to expand beyond the berm. And in expanding beyond the berm, they identify a space that would be best for that is on the left side of the park, and that is beyond Big Thunder Mountain. And so at that D23, not being ready to announce what exactly was planned for either of those spaces, they did something kind of unorthodox, which I think was genius. And they used the event to test how guests would respond to these concepts, both in the room and online. Get a bunch of free market research. And so Chris Beatty floats out a couple pieces of concept art, which they tell us right away are blue sky. These are things that could happen. They might happen. We're thinking about this. And for Animal Kingdom, they're thinking about Zootopia and Moana. And for Magic Kingdom, they're thinking about Beyond Big Thunder. What's Beyond Big Thunder at this point? They're envisioning Coco, the town of Santa Cecilia, which makes sense just beyond Frontierland, the American West turning into Mexico. Makes a lot of sense from a geographical standpoint. Then next to that, you had the Casa Madrigal of Encanto. And then out beyond both of them, lurking in the distance, were some shadowy turrets and craggy rock formations and some menacing-looking black birds, which harken Villains Land. And so they show this art, and when this art is shown and they go through the list of what could be, when they get to Villains, the room erupts. And when the room erupted, that changed the course of Disney theme park history forever. You and I and everyone at home made that happen. So in developing that original plan, the thought was very similar to what Hong Kong Disneyland had done, and what had recently been done, in fact, with Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland Park in Anaheim, that you can expand beyond the berm. You can go under the train tracks to other lands and create sort of another circle, almost like a mouse ear, on the outer rim of the park. Hong Kong, they did it real effectively, but they did it with mini lands. They're very small lands. There's Grizzly Gulch, which includes Big Grizzly Mountain Runaway Mine Cars. That's the only attraction. There's a water play area, but that's about it. Mystic Point, which has Mystic Manor and a restaurant and like a photo op space, and that's it. And then Toy Story, I say that's it. Meanwhile, that's literally Mystic Manor, the greatest attraction in current Disney parks. But beyond that, then Toy Story Land, which has 3 Carnival Fair style rides, which we've seen at many of the Toy Story lands around the world. So the idea of 3 mini lands, maybe with IPs that you don't have either the bandwidth or the belief that they fulfill a full giant land like a Star Wars or a Marvel or an Avatar or Cars or something of that sort. And so that's the plan for Magic Kingdom, but that all shifts based on the guest feedback that comes from that presentation at the 2022 D23 Expo. At that point, it is clear that Villains is the thing that people really, really, really want. And so, of course, Disney management, Encanto, a very current and popular IP, that gets shifted over to Animal Kingdom. They finally get to do Tropical Americas as part of that. Coco does see life over at Disney California Adventure. I hope something will happen at Disney World too, because that's my favorite movie. I love it. One of my favorite movies. And so that shifts away. And then Villains ends up taking the whole plot. And so when we get to the 2024 D23, the ultimate Disney fan event, which is the D23 Expo, but under a much harder to remember name, same thing. Josh D'Amaro is on stage at the Honda Center, and he announces that we are moving forward with Villains Land, and he unleashes this giant piece of concept art, which makes it very clear that this thing is bigger and bolder than it was before. And so, to make a long story short at that point, it's pretty obvious what happened is when they thought about going beyond Big Thunder Mountain at the Magic Kingdom, they developed a bunch of little lands that would have taken up that space. And on the road to D23 in 2024, they realized, well, people really responded to that Villains thing. Let's chase that Villains thing. Now, I can't say the same for the Cars thing. The Cars thing is a whole different story of not listening to your audience, and actually one of my favorite movies of all time, but I think just not the right place for it and not the right concept. But we'll talk about that another day, kids. But either way, Villains Land is a case of listening to your audience. People told you how excited they were about this thing. And so it got bigger and bolder. And in fact, it takes up the whole plot that would have been those 3 mini lands originally, and maybe even more so in that it pushed into the park into some of the space occupied by Tom Sawyer Island and the Rivers of America. Now that left a front part of the Rivers of America to figure out, and Walt Disney World demanded Cars. So that is what it is. Either way, what I think happened is, look, I'm not here to villainize rumors. This rumor originates from Len Testa, who does touring plans and the Disney Dish. And Len, certainly in his long career in this business, has developed some very strong contacts and sources. And, so have we. And I will tell you from personal experience, what happens sometimes is there's a nugget of truth and it gets embellished and you run it and you find out later that, oh, maybe all of that wasn't still accurate. Very famously, just last year, we had been told sometime quite a while before D23 last year that the Monsters, Inc. Door Coaster was happening and it was going to happen in Animation Courtyard. And at some point, that wasn't the truth anymore. There was a nugget of truth there. It was true at one point. It wasn't true when we got to D23. And I think that's the same thing that happened here. The nugget of truth is that at some point, when they went from Blue Sky into figuring out what Villains Land was going to be, that's when Josh D'Amaro barged into the room and said, this needs to be bigger and bolder. And it got bigger and bolder, so much so that it was 3 times the size it was supposed to be. It now included 2 attractions and so much more. And that's what I think happened. We sat back on this story for the last week and a half or so because I wanted to make sure I talked to as many people as possible who would know something about this. And we've several very vetted sources have now weighed in on this, and everyone sort of scratched their head and went, I don't know, the last time I sat in a meeting on this thing, it was definitely still that. Like the first time I sat in a meeting on this, it was that, and the last time I sat in a meeting, it was still the same thing. So it hasn't happened since before D23, so it's been over a year. It's not a recent development. Do I believe it happened at some point? Absolutely, because I always truly believe, especially with these more reputable people or these websites that have been around a long time like us or like Len. I do think whatever those rumors are, there's always a nugget, sometimes more. There's always at least a nugget of truth in those things that come from the inside. And sometimes there's a game of telephone that's played, or sometimes people just, I would say something happened more recent than it did. Maybe they heard something a while ago and now they've reached a point of contact and they relay that information. And it turns out by the point they've relayed that information, it's old. It's no longer valid. And that's what I think has happened here. Now, that being said, no matter what with Villains Land, we can expect 2 big e-ticket attractions. We can expect shopping. We can expect dining. We can expect a lot of very cool experiential things. And I think we've seen a couple of very cool things in the lead up already that should make you very excited. Number one, I know it's not everyone's favorite thing, the Villains show at Disney's Hollywood Studios. Not so much the show. I think the show is solid. I like the show very much. It could use some more performers, but either way. Not so much the quality of the show. It's more in the content of the show. The show focuses on, it features through projection technology, pretty much every Disney animated villain of all time appears in that show. But they had to pick 3 to appear on stage and be the stars of it. And the 3 they picked were Maleficent, Cruella de Vil, and Captain Hook. What do those 3 have in common? Well, those 3 are from several of the earliest Disney animated films ever. In fact, all 3 of those villains are from Walt Disney's lifetime. That's a pretty exciting thing if you're a Disney purist or you respect Disney history. It's very cool to see that kind of respect shown for legacy characters in a time where it often feels like the latest and greatest IP is what gets all the love. Your Frozens and your Encantos and those sorts of things, and Moana. It's nice to see those legacy characters being brought back to life. And so the commitment we've seen through presentations where they've listed the villains that are the inspiration for Villains Land, there's a lot to be excited about there. If you are a big Disney fan and have been a fan your whole life and have lived through most of that library, it's going to be very cool to see all these underserved characters that have huge followings finally get the respect they deserve on a grand scale. That's a very exciting thing. The other recent stuff that's super exciting is what they just did on the Disney Destiny, which is the Heroes vs. Villains ship. And with the Heroes vs. Villains ship, there are several villains experiences. There's the Cruella de Vil songwriting event that happens in the piano bar. There is the Maleficent character encounter that happens at Sarabi. There is the Dr. Facilier encounter, the parlor trick that happens on select evenings during the cruise. Those sort of experiential things, those entertainment offerings that are like that, I think speak volumes for where we're headed with Villains Land. It won't just be about these e-ticket attractions. I think there's an expectation that you're going to get to have very personal moments with these characters, which is what the Disney parks are all about. It's about living these stories. Whether it's an original story like Pirates of the Caribbean, The Haunted Mansion, Jungle Cruise, or living out what you've seen on screen in these films. That's what the Disney parks are all about. It's about living those experiences, whether it's the original stories like Pirates or Haunted Mansion or Jungle Cruise, or these animated films that you've seen your whole life on the screen, and being able to jump into them and play in that world and actually interact with those characters you love or love to hate. That's going to be a lot of the magic of Villains Land. And so, look, this is not a negative thing that they didn't just go bigger and bolder on Villains Land. I think the expectations are where they've needed to be from day one. And the expectation, this doesn't come from any knowledge I know from any sources. This is just as a fan sitting in that audience. My feelings on this project is it has to be one of, if not the greatest thing Walt Disney Imagineering has ever done. It has to be. The hype is unbelievable. The characters at play are among the most revered, loved, and most known in the world. Think about these are several of these characters began in novels, in literature, before Walt Disney. But when you name those characters, do you know what comes to mind for 99% of people in the world? It is those characters from the Disney animated movies and not their original source material or any other film adaptation of them that's really out there. So there is a tremendous responsibility to serve those characters right, and in doing so, serve your audience as they want to be. Look, the expectations have to be high and they have to deliver. They have to go big and bold, and I think they've known that for a very long time. And if Villains Land is anything short of big and bold and exceptional and spectacular, then Josh D'Amaro is going to have a problem on his hands, because this is Josh's project. This is the big thing that came into being when he inherited Disney Experiences from Bob Chapek, and then he got pushed out the door, and we're meant to feel that this is a new Walt Disney Company, a new regime, and that we once again believe in creativity and show quality and giving the guests what they want. And if we really believe in all of those things, this has to exceed all expectations, and that's going to be very hard because the expectations are already as high as they could possibly be. Now, I have faith in them. I believe in them. And I think as long as the money is right and the concept is right, they can deliver on this. And I'm very hopeful, knock on wood, I'm very hopeful that they will deliver on this, because as Disney fans, I think that's what we want. I think usually our anger and our angst and our resentment comes from when we see the company do less than it can, knowing that the Walt Disney Company is capable of anything and everything. I have not sat at this desk all these years and ranted and raved because I want the Walt Disney Company to fail. It's out of disappointment. It's all the times I've been disappointed because I know what they can do, and I want to believe that this regime can do it. And Villains Land is the moment. It's the pinnacle of this era of supercharged expansion, and it has to be the focal point. It has to be the crowning achievement. And we will accept, the world will accept, nothing less than that. So that's what I think happened. In short, the rumor is just not true. It probably happened at some point between Blue Sky and the official announcement, but it was a couple years ago at this point. So it's not a recent thing. I think it felt like the right time for it, probably because Josh D'Amaro is about to take the throne as CEO of the Walt Disney Company. So the timing made sense. Everybody wants to. I think also it comes from a genuinely good place, because I think everyone wants to believe in him and everyone behind him, that this company, the soul of this company, can be saved after several very difficult years. And I want to believe in that too. I want to believe, to quote the X-Files. So I hope you're with me. Let me know in the comments how you feel about all this. But in short, yeah, I don't think there's any validity to this current string of rumors. It's not a recent occurrence. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and please subscribe for more great content. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you real soon.